ordered, a story most people know probably, to cancel a performance in Israel, and they've been ordered to pay $12,000 in damages. The suit filed under a law that allows civil lawsuits against anyone who calls for a boycott against Israel. Is this the first time this law's been applied? Do you know, Al?
It's the first time this particular law has been applied, but there's a lot of other instances of Israel trying to silence critics. There's an American graduate student who's currently held in Tel Aviv airport trying to enter the country because she supported the boycott movement as well. But for us, this is the first case on this law.
It sends a message, says the lawyer for the complainants across in Israel, that calling for boycotts against the country has a price tag attached. Does this have any force?
It has a price tag in Israel. It doesn't have a price tag here. Israel cannot police the political opinions of New Zealanders.
Okay. By the way, the women say they've been overwhelmed with offers of financial support. They're going to try and raise $12,000 for the Gaza Mental Health Foundation as the outcome today. And a question for all three of you. Considering that Al is soon to hop on a long-haul flight out of New Zealand, where are you off to?
Belgium for 4 months.
Sabbatical?
A fellowship.
Right. Singapore Airlines has announced it'll launch the world's longest non-stop flight route this weekend, a daily service, no economy class seats, between Changi Airport and Newark, which serves New York City. How long do you want to be on a plane, all three of you? Is it one long hop, or is it good to get over and done with? What do you...
Yeah, it's always that balancing act, isn't it? I mean, I'm probably someone that likes to get it over and done with, because I find that, you know, when you travel and you say go to Hong Kong and then you stay overnight for one night and then you carry on, it just interrupts it because you just don't sleep and all that sort of thing. So I think I'm get there as fast as I can. But I have to say that, you know, these are long flights and that's a long time to be on one plane. So I really can't wait until we get the Startech technology where we just get to beam us up, you know, like beam me up, Scotty, and I can be in London or something like that.
Yes,
so
right.
I'm waiting for that.
Okay. Sanjay?
In my younger days, I used to enjoy just taking a trip directly. And these days, I actually prefer to actually do a transit and then break the journey and then check out the areas with my family and then continue on. So it depends on whether you have the luxury of time. If you need to get to A to B, fastest would probably be the best.
Al, I hope we aren't depressing you overly.
No, for me, I think it's like pulling off a plaster. It's going to be difficult no matter what you do, and you should just get it over and done with.
Bon voyage. When do you head off?
Sunday.
All right.
Are you going in one whole flight, or you're stopping over somewhere?
2 hours in LA to go through their confused system and then back onto the plane.
Oh, right, yes. I've been through the American confused system. Good luck.
It doesn't sound appealing. Yeah, good luck, and thank you for joining us today, Professor Al Gillespie. Don't have time for much more. Good luck if you're travelling tonight. Wet and windy in the capital. 7 inter-islander sailings cancelled. Surface flooding between the city and Naranga Gorge. Very strong winds till about 11 when it all starts to die down. You don't have big plans for the weekend outdoors, either of you?
I'm flying to Christchurch.
Are you? When are you flying?
Tomorrow morning for a fair trade conference.
You should be all right tomorrow morning by the sound of it.
You'll be fine by tomorrow morning. And Al will be fine by Sunday. Have a good weekend, both of you. Thank you for joining us today on the panel.
Thanks very much, Jim. Great to be here.
Leonie Freeman
Thanks, John.
and Sanjay Kumarasingam. And thank you for your company, everybody. Have a lovely weekend, whether you're working or not. And we will see you back on Monday. We're standing by for Checkpoint.
Nimbula Vinaka, welcome to Checkpoint. Thanks for joining us. I'm Alex Perrottet. Coming up on tonight's program, a lucky escape for a family as a bus ploughs through an Auckland shopfront. Fears the Florida death toll could rise after Hurricane Michael causes mass destruction that's left communities in ruin along the state's coast. New Zealand football looks for a new president after the resignation of Derrick Shaw. The markets bounce back. We're also with a group of teenagers who gave up their school holidays in order to learn a trade. And an Ashburton pensioner. This is an interesting story coming up. She's taking on Forest and Bird over the Bird of the Year competition. Why can't the 86-year-old cast her vote for the Tomtit, or can she? We'll find out after the news. Plenty to come on Checkpoint.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A New Zealand woman ordered to pay damages for encouraging Lorde to cancel concert in Israel says the whole thing has got to be a joke. After Lorde cancelled the concerts last year, an Israeli law firm sued Justine Sachs and fellow New Zealander Nadia Abu Shanab for the mental harm suffered by 3 teenagers who had missed out on the singer's show. An Israeli court has now ruled in the firm's favour and ordered the 2 women to pay $19,000 in damages. Ms Sachs says the ruling shows little regard for human rights.
It's totally upside down. It's a violation of all sorts of international law, human rights norms, and it just illustrates further to me that Israel is just so far from a democracy at this point. It's a joke.
Justine Sachs says she has no plans to visit Israel. A father saved his 2 children from injury when an out-of-control bus came towards them on a pedestrian crossing in Auckland today. The police say he saw the bus coming and pushed the children out of the way in time. He was taken to North Shore Hospital with moderate injuries, and the children only needed checkups at Starship. The Auckland Transport bus came to a stop when it ploughed into a shop in Birkenhead Avenue, and Inspector Kai Shaw says it's lucky no one was seriously hurt.
It's a school holiday and the weather is a bit wet and slippery, so you just have to pay extra care when you drive around.
Kai Shaw. The police are speaking to the bus driver about what happened. The man accused of raping 3 women and a child told the police he believed the women had made up the allegations in order to get a payout from ACC. The man, aged in his 70s, is on trial in the High Court in Auckland. Our court reporter Edward Gay has been covering the case.
Detective John Kennedy and Detective Senior Sergeant Richard Corbridge travelled to the man's home in Whanganui to ask him about the charges dating back to the 1970s. When they put the allegations to him, he denied them. When asked how 2 women could have given so much detail, the man said they were making it up and probably after money from ACC. The jurors are due to find out on Monday if the defendant will give evidence. Atui te ko te mātua, ko Edward Gay aho.
The Education Ministry wants teaching added to the official skill shortage lists so schools can hire foreign teachers more easily. Schools say they need more people from overseas because there are not enough New Zealand teachers. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The Auckland Secondary Principals Association says including teaching on the skill shortage lists would be fantastic. The Union for Primary Teachers and Principals, the Educational Institute, says bringing teachers from overseas is a short-term solution because most don't stay long. However, it says the fact the ministry has nominated teachers for inclusion on the lists is recognition of the crisis schools are facing. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment says teachers can be added only if there is strong evidence of a shortage. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
The Mayor of Christchurch says today's opening of the city's new central library, Tūranga, is a game changer. Leanne Dalzell opened the library at a ribbon-cutting ceremony attended by a large crowd this afternoon. As well as about 180,000 books and records, the Cathedral Square building contains computer suites, 3D printers, 2 cafes and a touchscreen wall. Ms Dalzell says it gives people of all ages a reason to come into the middle of town.
This is a world-class facility which will remain at the forefront of developing knowledge, technology and experiencing, fostering lifelong learning and enabling all our citizens to participate fully in what is a constantly changing world.
The Mayor of Christchurch, Leanne Dalzell. The Sea Lord crew member who went missing off the southern Wairarapa coast yesterday has still not been found. The company says when the man did not report for duty aboard the Otako yesterday morning, a search was immediately started. However, deteriorating weather today put a stop to the search. The same rough weather has forced the cancellation of Cook Strait ferry trips. 7 inter-islander trips have been cancelled, as have some Blue Bridge sailings. Met Service says the weather should improve over the weekend. It's 5:04. In sport, having steadfastly clung to his position for the past week despite a damning review of the sport, the president of New Zealand Football, Derrick Shaw, has announced he's stepping down. The independent review into the culture and governance of the organisation was released this last week and was highly critical of Shaw's leadership and his handling of the former chief executive Andy Martin, who resigned suddenly in June. Shaw compared his situation to that of the former Fletcher Building chair, Sir Ralph Norris, who resigned in February after the company announced a $600 million loss.
Certainly contacted a lot of people that really supported me and where we were. But I think at the same time, one of the pieces of feedback that I heard was, well, it's a little bit like Fletcher's Derrick. When something doesn't work out as it should, maybe the head of the organisation needs to step aside.
Derrick Shaw. The All Blacks hooker Dane Coles is expected to make his long-awaited return to rugby tonight for Wellington. Coles, who hasn't played since injuring his knee in November last year, will come off the bench in Wellington's premiership game against Taranaki in New Plymouth. Wellington need maximum points against Taranaki to guarantee themselves a semi-final spot. And Lindsay Vonn, widely regarded as the greatest female ski racer of all time, has announced she'll retire from competition following the 2018-19 season. That's the news.
Kia ora, g'day, Paul Brennan in for Brian Crumb tonight on nights between 7 and 8 at Sonic Tonic. Tonight, justice and the law is the theme. Plus we have our Friday Night Live feature from the Victoria Theatre in Devonport, Berlin-based singer-songwriter Lydia Cole, recorded by RNZ engineer Andre Upston. Country Life between 9 and 10, and we finish with the mixtape. We revisit Rhea Hall's RNZ music mixtape, where she shares influential songs from her youth. Join us tonight after 7 on Nights on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. There are severe weather warnings and watches in force for heavy snow and strong winds. For all of the North Island, rain or showers today with some heavy falls and snow lowering to 600 metres about the central high country tonight. Showers gradually clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. Southerly gales about Wellington and Taranaki easing early tomorrow. For Nelson, Buller and Westland, scattered showers clearing this evening. Fine tomorrow with early frosts. Southeast gales in exposed places easing tonight. Marlborough and Canterbury, rain with snow to 300 metres, easing this evening, then clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Showers returning to South Canterbury tomorrow night. Southerly gales about coastal areas easing tonight. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers falling as snow to 200 metres, clearing tonight. Early frosts inland tomorrow, followed by further showers. And for the Chatham Islands, rain today, fine breaks tomorrow with the odd shower. It's 7 at 5:30 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much, Katrina. A shopping street on Auckland's North Shore descended into chaos at lunchtime after a bus hit 3 pedestrians before crashing into a shop. Emergency services were called to Birkenhead Avenue after the bus mounted a pedestrian crossing and slammed into the glass front of a store. 2 children and their father were taken to hospital while bystanders who witnessed the crash stood shell-shocked. Here's our reporter Annika Smith.
It took a matter of seconds for the Auckland Transport bus to crash through the shop front, but bystanders lingered for hours, looking at the extraordinary sight. Karen Gibson was collecting donations for the Breast Cancer Foundation when she saw the accident happen.
The bus pulled out from the stop and instead of going up the street it went across the crossing and into the pedestrians that were on it and then crashed into the building across the road.
Karen Gibson says after the bus came to a stop, she saw a family had been walking across the pedestrian crossing.
And there was a little child that ended up between the van and the bus on the ground, and the father was just the other side of that barrier, and he was on the ground for a long time before he was checked out properly, and then he stood up.
The children's father had seen the bus coming towards them, and Inspector Kai Shaw from the Auckland Police says the man tried to protect his children.
He pushed his children away, and the children were not injured, and the bus, the father was struck somewhere by the bus with very minor injury.
Harshal Shah, owner of the Birkenhead Supret, heard a loud bang and ran outside his shop.
I saw a person lying on a pedestrian and there were 4 or 5 people helping them, but he was curious about their families. He was just constantly asking, where is my wife and kids? That's it. And then I called 111.
Mr. Shah says the man lay on the ground for half an hour while people crowded the area, trying to help while black smoke billowed from the bus. The 2 children were taken to Starship Hospital as a precaution, while their father was taken to the North Shore Hospital with moderate injuries. Inspector Kai Shaw says it's lucky that no one was more seriously hurt.
I was quite lucky because no one got seriously injured. It's a school holiday, and the weather is a bit wet and slippery, so you just have to pay extra care when you drive around.
Police say the female driver is traumatised and her recollection is that the bus just started accelerating. They're now trying to piece together exactly what happened with the help of witnesses and CCTV footage. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Annika Smith aho.
It's 10 minutes past 5. Florida Governor Rick Scott is urging communities to pray for survivors following the mass destruction caused by Hurricane Michael along the state's coast. The third most powerful hurricane ever to hit the US mainland tore rows of seaside homes from their foundations and roofs from schools in near record force winds, leaving neighbourhoods in ruins. Michael has claimed 6 lives, but Mr Scott fears that toll will rise as many residents chose not to evacuate. In a moment, we'll hear from CNN's Natasha Chen in the panhandle town of Panama City, but first, here's Bridget Burke.
Ground Zero. Aerial pictures of Florida's coastline show what authorities have described as unimaginable destruction in the wake of Hurricane Michael, which saw houses decimated, trees felled and roads broken up. Michael made landfall here as a Category 4, packing winds of almost 250 kilometres an hour. With more than 800,000 homes and businesses still without power in Florida, Alabama and Georgia early Thursday, residents are being warned it may not be reconnected for weeks, as fallen power lines mean some communities cannot be reached. Surveying the area from a helicopter, Florida Governor Rick Scott said he feared the death toll would rise, as many had chosen to stay home and ride out the storm.
We toured Bristol, Shipley, St. George Island, Mexico Beach, and Panama City Beach and Panama City. And what you see at Shipley and Bristol is it sort of looks like there was tornadoes. So you just see spots where everything was down, and you see it's like a tornado went through. Second, then if you go to St. George Island, and I was very concerned about that because when I was down there, I was down Monday and Tuesday trying to get everybody to evacuate. They told me there's 50 plus people that were staying, and so you're just scared to death that what happened to them.
On the ground, residents of the sleepy panhandle town of Mexico Beach surveyed the tsunami-like damage left by the wall of seawater Michael had pushed inland. Boats were ripped from their moorings and homes closest to the water were lost, leaving only their foundations. A few streets inland, around half the homes were reduced to piles of wood. Elizabeth Hanson and her daughter Emily, who had lived in Mexico Beach for nearly 20 years, said their neighbourhood was now unrecognisable.
It's pretty devastating. Like, everybody we know lost their house. Everybody. And our jobs.
And did you guys evacuate?
No, we stayed. We stayed in our home.
The family said many friends had lost their homes.
My personal friend lost her house. It's actually at the very end. Her house is completely gone. And my friend that I work for, that's her house. It's pretty much destroyed all the way up into the second floor. And then we have a person right there that we know, that we're very close with. Their house is completely gone.
Michael is the third most powerful hurricane ever to hit the US mainland. It weakened overnight to a tropical storm and is pushing northeast, bringing drenching rains to Georgia and the Carolinas, which are still recovering from Hurricane Florence last month. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
Now, CNN's Natasha Chen is in Panama City, which you heard Governor Scott describe as looking like it had been wiped out in a tornado.
Alex, we were driving around town today, especially along Highway 98, which is a commercial zone, and it was very difficult to navigate because so many large trees and power lines are blocking the roadways. And there are crews actively trying to clear those, but it's still not very safe for people to come back. And that's why officials are telling residents not to return until they've been specifically told to do so. In fact, there is a curfew right now until daylight because with the town mostly without power and without cell phone service, it's very hard to navigate and can be very dangerous in the dark.
Now, from what we can gather, Natasha, the death toll's a bit hard to calculate at the moment because from what I can hear, it's not as high as what might have been envisaged, but at the same time, we don't know how many people maybe failed to evacuate and then their houses are completely gone. We've seen photos of suburbs where the houses that were standing and now there's just the foundations in place. So have you got any more information on just how many people may have lost their lives?
We know at least 6 people have lost their lives. One person died in North Carolina, One child died in Georgia, the rest in the state of Florida. And a lot of these cases so far, these are situations where large trees fell on them, either on their cars or on their homes. This is definitely a huge wind gust that have caused this. This is wind damage and deaths by wind. So, and then slowly we may start to learn about other situations where people might have been injured. We know that one woman had to be airlifted to a hospital today because her neighbors thought that she was in distress and was surrounded by floodwaters. So they used a flashlight and sort of flagged down a rescue team that was flying overhead. So we're going to start to learn more information as time goes on, especially because, as I mentioned, cell service and even landlines are very patchy right now. Some family members have not been able to get in touch with their relatives, so they may be missing or they may just be unable to communicate at this point.
And what's the situation now with a huge amount of people, of course, without power as they try to rebuild? Have people got the basic necessities in order to survive?
You know, Alex, that's interesting. We've heard people calling in to emergency services asking about food resources, and those folks have been asked to go to emergency shelters and get those resources there. There are a couple of stores that have started to reopen today, but they are very careful in how much they allow each party to purchase. So they are rationing out the resources in the stores and only allowing a certain number of people in at a time. So it's very limited here. I think a lot of people did get what they needed ahead of the storm, but right now they may be running a little bit low because some of these folks did not know this was going to be such a tough storm. A lot of times they hear reports that a storm is coming and then it sort of tapers before it actually arrives. This is the opposite case. Hurricane Michael picked up a lot of steam and gathered speed very quickly toward the end, sort of catching some of these locals by surprise.
Natasha Chen in the devastated Panama City in the Florida Panhandle area at 17 minutes past 5. New Zealand football is looking for a new president following a scathing report that revealed harassment, bullying, poor leadership and a boys' club culture. Last week, you might remember, we spoke to President Derrick Shaw, who told us he had the full support of his membership and that he was the best one to take the organisation into the future. That was despite calls from people in the game that Mr Shaw should resign and that New Zealand football couldn't start afresh with him in the job. Here's what he told us.
I've made a personal commitment to implement the findings of the review. I think that's sort of critical, and that's the commitment of the board. If the membership of New Zealand football want us to step down, I think that's appropriate. But I think in the meantime, the feedback I've had from members of New Zealand football is there's a job to do, and we expect you to do it.
But today, as Derrick Shaw announced he was falling on his sword, I asked him what has changed.
The thing on reflection is really around the opportunity for football to move forward, and the sense is certainly I wanted to give myself a little bit of time post the announcement, but also I think reflecting on, sometimes when the head of the organisation leaves, there's a sense that the game can move forward, but also wanted to talk to the membership of New Zealand football over the period, because you'll probably be aware that we only received the report the morning of the announcement in the afternoon, and so not a lot of time relative to talk to membership about the findings from the review. So I've certainly...
And they weren't very happy with you, were they? I mean, that seems to be the thing that's changed from last week, is that you were convinced that people wanted you to stay. Now you've realised you don't have that support.
Actually, I'd say it's the reverse, actually, Alex. I've spoken to most of the members over the past few days, and the support I've received has been very, very positive. But I think...
So why are you going?
Because I think in the interests of the game, that there's an opportunity, I think, for the members in New Zealand football to sort of to move forward. And it's been a difficult decision for me, because I'm not a person that steps away from things. You'll be aware I've fronted every part of the review process.
Yeah, and we do appreciate that. We appreciate you. Yeah, we appreciate you talking with us today as well to outline it. But I just want to get a very accurate picture of just what's happened in the last week. I want to ask you, did you seek a meeting with the heads of the 7 regional councils, and did they turn you down and have their own one and not invite you?
No, I have not sought a meeting with the 7 federations of New Zealand football, but I have spoken to nearly all of them around the game and the review. No, but I did not. Have definitely not sought a meeting of the 7 federations.
And do you have the support of all those 7 councils?
You'd have to speak to them individually because
Well, you've just told us that you do have the support.
Yes, yeah. I've certainly got the support of the majority of them. And I've given them my commitment to work forward around the recommendations from the review. Okay, now John Ormond was I think he's the most recently appointed member of the board. He came on fresh this year. There was a lot of hope in him as a fresh face, not just because of that, but he's a merchant banker. He's also got very close links to the football community. 2 days ago, he resigned and he said, in particular, your position was untenable. Now, that's piled incredible pressure on you, hasn't it, to go? No, actually, I made my decision prior to John's announcement.
So who else is going to step down from the board?
I couldn't say, actually, Alex. That's a matter for each individual board members.
Do you think other people should go, as you're saying, to get a fresh look and a fresh approach looking forward? People should follow your lead and go out the door?
That's really a matter for the membership to make that decision. Not for me to make any comment about their ongoing involvement or otherwise.
Last week, you told us you were very committed, and at the beginning of the interview today, again, you said that hasn't changed. My commitment. Yeah. So why are you going?
Because it's really, I think, as I said, it's the right thing to do, and it's a matter for the game to move forward. And I wanted to also talk to people in the game, around just that personal commitment I've got. And that's really up to them to decide if they want me involved in the game at whatever level or whatever activity into the future.
And can you just remind us when you made the decision that you would resign?
I made the decision on Monday night this week.
And what was the straw that broke the camel's back on that weekend?
Oh, there was no straw. It was just taking into account a whole range of factors, Alex, around matters, and I advised the Vice President on Monday evening that was my decision.
Derrick Shaw there, the former President of New Zealand Football. Right on 23 minutes past 5, Russia has suspended passenger flights from heading to the International Space Station while it investigates what went wrong with the Soyuz spacecraft just after takeoff from Kazakhstan. It was dramatic, it was dangerous, and it hasn't happened for decades. But the crew, a Russian and an American, did survive. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports.
And there is liftoff of the Soyuz MS.
A burst of fire and noise as a Soyuz rocket lifted its crew into orbit. At first, this was a routine launch to the International Space Station. Then came this.
Inaudible.
Less than 3 minutes into the flight, the commander, Alexei Ovchinin, reported an emergency.
Emergency booster 2 minutes 45.
The booster system had failed. The launch had to be aborted.
Failure of the booster.
Moments later, the 2 men were plunging back to Earth in their tiny capsule. The crew did train for this nightmare scenario, the grueling G-force their bodies would have to endure. But Russia's Soyuz rocket hasn't failed on launch in over 3 decades. For American Nick Hague, it was an abrupt end to his first ever mission. He was due to spend 6 months in orbit. Ever since Yuri Gagarin launched into orbit, Russia has been immensely proud of its space program. This accident then will be a major blow. But it's not just a matter of prestige. Russian rockets are currently the only way up to the International Space Station. What happens now then is a big question. Rescuers were quick to reach the remote landing site. hugely relieved, too, that the crew emerged unharmed, even walking. But all Soyuz flights have now been suspended as an investigation is launched.
The safety measures of this launcher are very good, and the two astronauts are well. They are in good shape. So therefore I think we should investigate the case and as soon as possible fly again.
Tonight the astronauts were reunited with their families. For them it was a moment of joy. For Russia though, a time of tough questions over what exactly went so wrong here.
Sarah Rainsford reporting at 25 minutes past 5. Now, it's said that great libraries build communities. Christchurch's new $92 million Central City Library, which opened to much fanfare today, hopes to be proof of that. The golden-coloured, square-shaped building called Tūranga will hold 180,000 books and records. The largest and newest library in the South Island also features computers, music studios, 3D printers, pretty much every whiz-bang gadget you can think of, including a $1 million touch-screen wall. The Mayor, Leanne Dalzell, grinning ear to ear, opened the 5-storey building today. But behind any good library are the librarians. Lynn Gifford will be one of those responsible for looking after and caring for some of the 180,000 books, records and historic texts. She took our reporter and self-identifying library geek Logan Church for a tour of the new library before it opened to the public.
Lynn Gifford became a librarian at the old Central City Library on Gloucester Street in 1982, and it runs in the family.
My mother was a librarian. She worked at the engineer at the university, and my uncle actually worked here, and my sister worked here, and one of my cousins worked at Auckland Public Libraries, Auckland City Libraries, and yeah, that's
family tradition.
Yeah, it just seems to be a thing.
She's one of the longest serving librarians out of a total staff here of about 100 people all up. The balconies of the top floors show a breathtaking panorama of the new city. Or for those like Lynn who remember the old one, an opportunity to reminisce.
Gloucester Street sort of runs where that truck is, and on the right where that crane is, it would have been part of the old library, but now that's where the convention centre's going.
Walking through Tūranga, last-minute touches are underway. Rows upon rows of new bookcases stand on most floors, interrupted only by self-checkout machines, computers or other gadgets and gizmos. For Lynn, libraries have come a long way since 1982.
There were less people in Christchurch then, and but it was all very much book and magazines and newspapers, because we didn't have technology.
But now there's sewing suites, music studios, a theatre, a massive TV wall made up of 12 individual TV panels. PlayStation controllers are at the ready. Even a few years ago, the idea of having all of this in a library was simply, well, not even thought of.
When you see the amount of technology in a place like this and then look back to, what was it, 1982, what on earth goes through your mind?
Well, I suppose it's been a gradual thing. You know, we went from 1982 to having nothing, and then we went to a sort of, at the time, a new library system which did more computerised things, and then we got the internet, and so it's been a gradual rise.
Heading down the stairs to the kids area.
And there's a tree now that the children can climb into and sit in the middle of there and read, and a slide and that round thing over there.
Lynn and I went up the rounds thing. I'm going to go down the slide.
I'm
going to go down the slide. Sorry, James, if I'm breaking the rules. At the end of our tour, we worked out how to use the $1 million touchscreen wall.
So this is the $1 million touchscreen wall.
This is the touchscreen wall, which is pretty amazing.
So what does it actually, like, what does it do?
So what they are, they're images that we have collected from our own collection from the older newspapers that we have. So it's basically a montage going, you can go right around the city or you can come further in.
Think of it like a gigantic iPad showing the Christchurch skyline as Picasso probably would have visualised it. You can touch different pictures, which creates a pop-up screen with relevant information. The library opening is a big win for the Christchurch City Council. Local and central authorities have faced criticism for what many in Christchurch believe to be a somewhat stuttering rebuild. But perhaps this is the start of a new chapter for post-quake Christchurch. Kei o te tahia hau mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Logan Church tēnei.
It's just gone 5:30 on Checkpoint. Thanks for joining us. There's plenty coming up soon, including the markets that bounced back today. We'll have the details in business. Nona Peltier is standing by. A group of teenagers give up their school holidays to learn a trade. And an Ashburton pensioner asks Forest and Bird why she's excluded from voting in the Bird of the Year competition just because she doesn't have a computer. We'd love your feedback. Get in touch with us on the text 2101 is the number. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, Checkpoint, or email us, checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
A woman ordered to pay damages for encouraging Lorde to cancel her concerts in Israel says the ruling shows little regard for human rights. After Lorde cancelled her shows last year, an Israeli law firm sued Justine Sachs and her fellow New Zealander Nadia Abu Shanab for the mental harm suffered by 3 teenagers who missed out on the concert. An Israeli court has ruled in the law firm's favour and ordered the pair to pay $19,000 in damages. A father who saved his 2 children from being hurt when a bus headed towards them on an Auckland pedestrian crossing has won praise from the police. They say the man saw the bus coming and pushed the children out of the way in time. He was taken to North Shore Hospital with moderate injuries and the children only needed checkups at Starship. A man accused of multiple rapes several decades ago has told the police he believed the women made up the allegations to get an ACC payout. The man, who's in his 70s, was replying to a question about how the women could have given so much detail. He's on trial in the High Court in Auckland, and jurors will know on Monday if he'll give evidence. The Education Ministry wants teaching added to the official skills shortage lists so schools can hire foreign teachers more easily. The Secondary Teachers Union is welcoming the move, but the Union for Primary Teachers says foreign teachers don't stay long. The Educational Institute wants the government to make changes so more New Zealanders want to train as teachers. Sea Lord says the search for a crewman missing from a fishing boat will not be resumed unless there is new information. The search was launched yesterday when the man went missing off the southern Wairarapa coast, but it was stopped by rough weather this morning. Sea Lord says the estimated survival time has long passed. The Mayor of Christchurch says today's opening of the city's new Central Library, Tūranga, is a game changer. Leanne Dalzell opened the building in Cathedral Square this afternoon. She says it gives people of all ages a reason to come into the middle of town. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
And you can watch that report on the Tūranga Library in Christchurch on our Facebook page as well as on the website, because Logan Church actually does go down the slide.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, he's done a lovely job. It looks a great place.
It's almost like GoPro from the chest footage. It's a very short slide though.
Yeah, if you don't get sick by watching those kinds of things, first person,
True. Motion sickness. Thank you, Katrina. We'll see you at 6 o'clock. And we are going to report on the markets before we flick to Nona Peltier. So we have a report here from Matt Chatterton. The New Zealand share market bounced back today. This is despite another volatile day on the global markets. The NZX Top 50 Index ended up with 1.4%, the day after recording the 5th largest drop in its history. Matt Chatterton has the story.
The volatility began on Wall Street on Wednesday when the US Federal Reserve warned that America's booming economy needed to be kept in check and it needed to raise interest rates. Stock markets reacted sharply, first Wall Street, then Asian markets and New Zealand. But Diane Maxwell, head of New Zealand's Commission for Financial Capability, believes New Zealanders shouldn't panic as markets move around.
We can see KiwiSaver often in our apps, in our banking apps. We watch it too closely. We want to look at it every day, and that's not a great thing for something that's a long-term investment. So we'd really encourage people to keep calm, ride it out. This is important savings for people, I know that, but ride it out because you'll get those gains back in time.
Diane Maxwell says, ironically, the reason why the US Central Bank is looking at raising interest rates is because the American economy seems fundamentally strong. And while the markets are volatile, New Zealanders shouldn't fret too much about KiwiSaver, which is how many people here hold their shares.
KiwiSaver is an excellent investment and savings product for the long term, and that's what most New Zealanders are using it for. So you have highs and lows, you have ups and downs to those balances that you'll see. And it would be a real pity if people looked at it too closely and tried to sort of whip money out to put into other investments, thinking they were going to be a better return.
Wall Street fell 3.3% on Wednesday, then lost another 2% last night. Market analysts say the current downturn is a correction, and Wall Street veteran Ted Weisberg of Seaport Securities told CNN the current volatility should be seen in a broader historical context.
You had the crash of '87 where the market was down 22% in one day, and then the 73-74 period. But on balance, the direction of the markets have been up, not down, and dislocations happen. Nothing goes one way forever. I certainly would be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater right here.
Chief strategist at JB Ware, Bernard Doyle, says corrections can be good for the economy.
Last year we had 3 days in global markets of more than negative 1% in a day. This year we've had 20. I certainly don't look at this current market environment and think to myself we're overdue.
Much of the brunt of the sell-off has been borne by growth stocks, says Mr Doyle.
If you look at what sparked the sell-off offshore, it was tech stocks, many of them down in excess of 5% in one day. Now, the way the market tends to behave when something like that's going on is it looks for growth anywhere, and it doesn't have to be technology. So in New Zealand, we've got growth stocks such as A2 and Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, and even though, as I say, it's unrelated to the tech sector really, because they have that growth flavour to them, investors tend to shoot first and ask questions later.
While New Zealand's markets are now closed, the focus will be on how the US and Europe bounce back following one of their worst trading days in recent memory. For Checkpoint, Matt Chatterton.
At 23 minutes to 6, Nana Peltier is here and was listening to that. So we rallied.
Well, you could call it a rally or a little bounce. I wouldn't call it a rally.
Okay.
I mean, a rally sort of suggests that there's a sustained growth behind it, and we don't know that. There's just a lot of volatility in the market. And really, we're seeing Asia's opened. It's a frail situation there. There's a lot of factors at play, and nothing really changed from yesterday, as a matter of fact. The only difference is there were more bargain hunters in the market looking at those cheaper priced stocks that fell significantly the day before. And for example, in our local market, A2 Milk, which is our largest company, it fell about 11% yesterday. That took the market down with it. Now, it wasn't on huge volume, as we talked about yesterday. And again, today, not a massive volume, but, people went in there and bought that A2 Milk stock, for example, and drove that company up 9.4%. That has a significant effect on the overall market when your largest company rises to that extent. So we finished up 1.4% up. But a lot of that is associated with the rise in A2 Milk, which had taken quite a large hit the day before. And so that was an 85-cent gain. And so that's fairly significant. But in the scheme of what we're talking about with so much volatility, it's hard to read much into that. I mean, that's one stock, just a big, huge movement one day and then the next.
I suppose what you can predict is those US interest rates, and they're going up now.
Well, they are going up,
business
but
is doing well.
At the same time, the U.S. President Donald Trump criticized his chair, the U.S. Federal Reserve chair, again about interest rates, saying that the U.S. Federal Reserve was wrecking the markets. Well, I mean, he hired him. I don't think he's going to fire him.
He's hired a few that he's fired.
Yes, that one, yeah, it could be. Who knows? Well, that's why there's so much volatility, because there's a great deal of uncertainty. And this whole thing with trade and China is underpinning an awful lot of that uncertainty. And the IMF came out just this afternoon and talked about the sustained trade tensions and the effect it's going to have on Asia's growth over the longer term. I mean, this is really going to affect some of these smaller emerging economies, and what they're suggesting is it could slash their growth rates in a sustained way by 0.9 percentage points over the longer term. Now, in the shorter term, that's not going to have an effect. So the economies are still going to grow. But when you look out, it means that there are going to be some fundamental changes. And what is that going to do to Asian economies? And of course, New Zealand is greatly exposed there. So you can expect volatility, frail markets. These are the kinds of things we expect to see in markets, and that's one of the reasons why the Retirement Commissioner is saying, don't look every day and get upset. Don't panic over changes, because we're in it for the long term. That's the best way to look at it. Yes, indeed. And I guess, you know, so that's where we were with the markets anyway, yeah.
Okay, manufacturing, new data on that sector saying that we're running out of resources.
Well, it's really human resources. So we're talking about being able to recruit people to do these jobs, fill the positions. There is demand, there are orders, people want to buy our products, our goods and services, but we are constrained by skill shortages, and that's the same old story we've seen for some time. And so the performance of manufacturing index, it fell. It seems to be stuck in a rut. Now, it was at 51.7. That indicates expansion, 50 being expansion. But we've had 5 rough months in a row. And so that's a bit concerning, because that's an engine of New Zealand's economic growth, right? So if the manufacturing sector is stuck in a rut because they can't hire enough people, that could be a problem longer term, right? We don't know. So yeah, these are difficult times, lots of uncertainty, and I think that people just need to ride it out, not panic. Definitely don't panic.
Sure, yeah. And skill shortage is something else coming up later on the program. Before you go, anything else that happened on the markets?
Well, you know, our New Zealand dollar perked up overnight. Don't ask me exactly why. It has to do with people buying, selling, and so on, as the usual story. But there was a lot of people looking around for Kiwi dollars, and that saw us rise a bit. We're at 65.2 US cents. 91.5 Australian and 49.3 pence. And just to recap there, our NZX Top 50 Index closed up nearly 1.4%, rising 122 points to 8,843.
Wow.
There you go.
Comprehensive. Thank you. Nona Piltz with the very latest in the business world. The big message from Nona is don't stress, don't panic. All will be well despite the volatility. It's coming up to 18 minutes to 6. And a charming story that on school holidays. For many parents, it's a struggle to get their kids out of bed in the holidays, let alone get them out of the house. But for 8 Auckland families this past fortnight, it's been a breeze. Their teenagers have spent the past 2 weeks waking up even earlier than they usually would for school to work for free. What is this craziness, you're asking me? Well, as part of their regular maintenance work, Housing New Zealand has, in partnership with 2 schools, given 8 teenagers 2 weeks' work experience in plumbing, carpentry or electric work. So Zach Fleming and our cameraman Nick Monroe spent yesterday with 4 of them to see how they were finding it.
For most teenagers, school holidays are for sleeping in. But these 2 7th formers aren't most teenagers. They voluntarily traded in their holiday for work experience.
Because you get to do stuff, not just sit on your ass and be bored.
Mark Tanuto likes moving around, he says, and he's given up more than a sleep-in.
So I was supposed to be in like overseas for my holiday.
Overseas where?
Oz. But then I just chose to do this for experience.
Traded a holiday in Sydney to learn to be a tradie. Next to him is Desmond Hay. They're both students at De La Salle College in Mangere. And we're in a state home. They're learning how to rejib a wall, thanks to a partnership between their school and Housing New Zealand, which is using required maintenance to its stock to facilitate work experience for teens like Mark and Desmond.
Did you know how to do any of this before you came?
Nah, I learned how, just to fix the wall, change the lock, change the doorknob, skirting, which is like framing for the doors and stuff.
They're 2 of 8 teenagers who learned trades these school holidays. While they were learning carpentry, across town 16-year-old Kalis Webster Ruahi was learning to be a sparky.
Light switches, light bulbs, power points, just simple stuff. Yeah. And then Grant does all the expert stuff.
Did you know how to do any of that before you started?
Jack. I was lost at first.
Grant is Grant Birch, an electrician of 52 years.
What colour goes where, mate?
Red goes into brown.
Yeah.
Black goes into blue.
Correct.
They learn by doing, but there's a short leash. It's no different to an apprenticeship. Everything is double-checked.
Very good, mate. All set up nicely. Yeah, good man. I'll tell you what, when you do about 40 or 50 of those, mate, you'll be able to do it with your eyes shut.
The reason the pilot's small to start is because the schools involved, De La Salle and Mangere College, only put forward teens who are keen, super keen. Kalis asked to take some wiring home.
So he could learn how to strip cables and twist them properly before they go into the connections, like the power points and lights.
It says a lot about a person, right, wanting to take those cables home and learn
That's
himself.
right, that's right. I was sort of a little bit dumbstruck because, you know, who wants to do that? They go home and do their own thing. But that's because he wants to learn.
Housing New Zealand spent $474 million on maintenance across 62,000 homes in the 2016-17 financial year. Add to that new state housing builds ramping up, and Acting Chief Operations Officer Caroline Butterworth says this pilot's potential for expansion is huge.
It is a win-win for everyone, and it really means that kids who are enthusiastic and do have an aspiration to work in the trades, we can give them a fantastic helping hand when they're still at school.
I met Caroline at another home in Mangere, where while Mark and Desmond learned to be carpenters and Kalis learned to be a sparky, 16-year-old Christopher Tavita was learning to be a plumber.
In the holidays, I just stay home, do nothing, so it was good for me to get into this, so I can get out of the house and start doing something useful, learn how to refit and take out vanities, connecting pipes, fixing leaks, and taping, yeah. Like getting the physical experience. I'm not a theory person, like writing and this stuff, don't like reading, yeah.
Christopher's dream was to be a doctor. He said that hasn't worked out. He didn't want to elaborate. But now, thanks to this pilot, he's on to what he told me is his second plan. Train to be a teacher while using plumbing as an income.
Miss Howell worked it out with me. She said that I can get qualifications in plumbing and go back and give it to the school so I can teach material tech. So it works both ways for me, both ways.
It seems to work always for everyone. The state benefits.
It allows us just to reach more deeply into the communities that we have homes in, and it's incredibly satisfying to know that you're making a difference to people's lives beyond simply housing them.
Families benefit.
Yeah, I've already done the toilet at home, toilet seat, been doing some plumbing myself at home.
Mangere College Principal Tom Webb says the schools benefit.
It's showing that students who live in Mangere can get jobs in Mangere, and that's a really important thing for the kids. They can contribute to their local community.
And obviously the teenagers benefit.
I want to be a carpenter because my family at the moment wants to build a house in the islands, and I want to help out with it. Yeah.
Which island?
Niue and Raro. It's my mum and dad's islands. Yeah.
So this is the start of the dream to become a carpenter to help your family build a house in Niue?
Yeah. So, yeah.
For Checkpoint, Zach Flynn.
Just wonderful. You've got to go and watch that back again. Some inspiring young people taking part in a great project to get into the building career. And while that pilot from Housing New Zealand is helping to fill our shortage of tradesmen, the government's also considering ways to fix our teacher shortage. One idea is to fast-track work visas for foreign teachers by recognising teaching as an official skill shortage area. School principals say the shortage of teachers has reached crisis point, especially in Auckland, and the Education Ministry has nominated early childhood, primary as well as secondary teaching for inclusion on the essential skills in demand lists. Here's our education correspondent John Gerritsen.
If an occupation is on the essential skills lists, there's no need for employers to check a New Zealander is available to do the job. Richard Dykes from the Auckland Secondary Principals Association says that would make a big difference to the city's schools.
I can remember back several years when teachers were still on that list, and the ability of principals to get quality teachers from overseas was dramatically higher, and I can remember it changing, and it just became that much harder to get people over. Look, if they just want to come for 3-4 years, let's get them in here. It's highly likely that once they get here, they're going to stay longer. We want those quality teachers to come in here in front of our students.
Richard Dykes says inclusion on the lists will help secondary schools cope as student numbers rise over the next 4 or 5 years. Linda Stewart from the teacher union The Educational Institute says the nomination shows the Education Ministry recognises the severity of the teacher shortage. But she says bringing teachers from overseas is a short-term solution.
I've spoken to principals recently who've talked about bringing people in from overseas into their schools, and actually they don't last. And they go back to where they came from because they just find that it's too hard.
Linda Stewart says what's really needed are changes that will encourage more New Zealanders to train as teachers. She says she disagrees with the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment's preliminary assessment that there is only moderate evidence of a teacher shortage.
We've got a crisis. I've never seen it like this in my teaching career, and I've never seen where, we've got so few people going into train. And that's a real concern. So bringing people in from overseas is not actually really dealing with the crux of the problem that we have facing us at the moment.
Stephen Dunstan from MB says it will consult unions and others to get a more accurate picture. He says teaching can be added to the lists only if the ministry finds strong evidence of a shortage.
Because the lists provide a fast track, into jobs in New Zealand, we really have to be assured that there aren't New Zealanders to do these positions or people who can be readily trained to do them. So that's really important, that there is a strong demand for them.
Stephen Dunstan says the earliest teachers could be included on the shortage lists is March next year. Other professions nominated for inclusion are carpenters, plumbers and restaurant managers. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
It's 9 minutes to 6. Here's a first. The US President Donald Trump appears to have been stunned into silence during a meeting with the American rapper Kanye West at the White House. Apparently it's just Ye West now. Get in touch if you've got a view on that. We'll call him Mr. West. He's been one of the best-selling music artists of all time, of course, and he lavished praise on Mr. Trump during a half-hour monologue in which he spoke about a range of issues, including the Democratic Party, schools and North Korea. He also banged his fist on the Oval Office's famous Resolute desk and spoke about his bipolar diagnosis. Our Washington correspondent Jane O'Brien was listening.
So that meant if you actually read the amendment, you get locked up and turned to a slave.
There aren't many people who can silence President Trump, but the rapper Kanye West now has that distinction. Wearing a Trump signature red baseball cap emblazoned with "Make America Great Again," Mr. West said he felt empowered every time he put it on.
It was something about when I put this hat on, it made me feel like Superman. You made a Superman, that's my favorite superhero. And you made a Superman cape for me also as a guy that looks up to you.
And for 30 minutes he held forth on subjects as wide-ranging as the existence of a parallel universe, growing up without a dad, misdiagnosed bipolar disorder, and a rallying call to Americans to support their president.
If he don't look good, we don't look good. This is our president. He has to be the freshest, the
He even had advice on replacing Air Force One with iPlane One.
I brought a gift with me right here. This right here is the iPlane One. It's a hydrogen-powered airplane, and this is what our president should be flying in. Look at this shirt.
Kanye West has broken with many African Americans and celebrities who say the president has enabled racism in the US. He's been harshly criticised and even booed for his public support of Mr. Trump. But Mr. West's support remains undiminished, and his Oval Office meeting ended with vows of undying love, hugs and a rather bemused president who must have realised that for once somebody else had stolen the show.
That was quite something. That was quite something.
That was from the soul.
Yeah, no, it's really very interesting. Yes, yeah, please.
Donald Trump there ending that report from Jane O'Brien. It's just come out to 6.5 to 6. Now, what can you do if you want to exercise your democratic right to vote, but you find there's no way you can have your say? That's the situation that 86-year-old Nikki Dunn found herself in as she went to vote for the prestigious, sometimes scandalous, Bird of the Year competition. The easiest way to vote is to go onto the Forest and Birds Bird of the Year website and just click vote on your favourite bird. Nikki wanted to cast her vote for her favourite bird, the South Island tomtit, but she doesn't have a computer. So she got out her trusty pen and paper and wrote a letter to Forest and Bird Management to try and cast her vote anyway. Our very busy South Island reporter Logan Church picks up the story from the sitting room of Nikki Dunn's retirement home in Ashburton.
I voted for the South Island tomtit.
And why did you vote for the South Island tomtit?
Well, mostly because he looks so cute and he's so wee. He's just lovely. I think I did see one once when I was on a forest walk, probably somewhere in North Canterbury maybe, but I couldn't tell you exactly where.
Do you remember what it looked like?
Well, just that he's so small and cute and black and white.
But you ran into some problems, didn't you, when you went to vote for it for Bird of the Year this year?
Yes, I did, because there was always a sheet in the Forest and Bird that you could record who you wanted and post it away, but there wasn't one this year, and I don't have anything to do with computers, so I just couldn't vote.
And what did you do?
Well, I wrote to the magazine and just said what I'd told you, and I did say at the end of the letter that I know my vote won't be counted, but I'll tell you anyway. It's the South Island tomtit. That's it.
Are they counting your votes though?
I think so. I had a ring this morning. No, this afternoon, and I believe it's going to be counted.
And what did they say on the phone to you?
Oh, they were just kind of interested because I'd taken the bother to write.
I suppose if you don't have access to a computer though, and there isn't an actual form you can send in, you don't really have any other option other than to write, is there?
That's correct.
Do you think that's a bit of a problem?
Would be for some people, but I write letters all the time.
But you don't have access to a computer though, do you?
No, well, I could if I tried, because some of my relations have computers, and friends. Everyone does, I think, except old ladies like me.
I don't think calling yourself old is fair.
Well, I am.
And why the South Island tomtit over other birds? I mean, there are plenty of other amazing birds out there.
Well, that's the trouble. There's so many you could vote for. But I just chose that one this time.
Are there any birds that you definitely would not vote for?
Well, no. I don't like the birds of prey, but I mean, they can't help what they are, can they?
Why don't you like the birds of prey?
Oh, because when I see them flying, hovering, waiting to just dive and pick up some poor wee animal. So, and that beak they have.
It's quite sharp and piercing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the South Island tomtit it is.
He's just sweet.
Would you like the organisers of the Bird of the Year competition to look at putting a paper form back out there for maybe next year's competition?
Yes, I would love that.
It'd make it a whole lot easier for you, wouldn't it?
Well, not only me, other elderly people that don't have computers. But I mean, I know a lot of elderly people who wouldn't write a letter, but I'm used to writing letters, even to our local council.
Do you write to your local council often?
Well, not often, but yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes they need a writing too, don't they?
I would think so.
86-year-old Nikki Dunn speaking to our reporter Logan Church. If you were watching that interview, Nikki's letter to Forest and Bird was retweeted almost 100 times and received almost 500 likes on Twitter. It was signed off by Mona, which is Nikki Dunn's other name. Forest and Bird assures us her vote will be counted. There's a little bit of time for your feedback now. A negative view on Christchurch's new library. One listener says, sadly, the Christchurch library has been built nowhere near public transport nor parking, so perhaps it's just for the ambient and fit. And then on New Zealand football, the president, Derrick Shaw, resigned today. Someone said, I'm unsure why he's getting the push. It's a boys' club from the ground up. Not sure him going will change anything at all. So much more to come on Checkpoint after the news.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A father saved his 2 children from injury when an out-of-control bus veered towards them on a pedestrian crossing in the Auckland suburb of Birkenhead today. The police say he pushed the children out of harm's way just in time. He was taken to North Shore Hospital with moderate injuries while the children were checked at Starship Hospital. Inspector Kai Shaw says the man acted quickly to protect them.
He pushed his children away and the children were not injured, and the father was struck somewhere by the bus with very minor injury.
Kai Shaw says it's lucky no one was seriously hurt. The police have been talking to the bus driver about what happened. A New Zealand woman ordered to pay damages for encouraging Lord to cancel concerts in Israel says the court ruling shows little regard for human rights. After Lord cancelled the concerts last year, an Israeli law firm sued Justine Sachs and fellow New Zealander Nadia Abu Shanab for the mental harm suffered by 3 teenagers who had missed out on the singer's show. An Israeli court has now ruled in the firm's favour and ordered the 2 women to pay $19,000 in damages. Ms Sachs says the ruling violates international law and shows that Israel is so far from democracy that it's a joke. The Retirement Commissioner is urging KiwiSaver members not to be alarmed by share market falls over the past 2 days. The NZX Top 50 Index had one of its biggest falls ever yesterday, though it has bounced back a bit this afternoon. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones and Nasdaq indexes were both down again today. The Commissioner Diane Maxwell says KiwiSaver members may see a drop in their balances over the next week, but shouldn't worry.
Don't panic, don't do anything drastic, don't leap in and try and change funds. KiwiSaver is it's a long-term savings vehicle, and we need to ride out the highs and the lows that will inevitably happen across that savings period.
The Retirement Commissioner Diane Maxwell. The man who went missing from a fishing boat off the southern Wairarapa coast yesterday has been named. He's 25-year-old Pātahi Rewi Hikawairangi Kawana, a deckhand from Hawke's Bay who has been a member of the crew for the Otako for 2 years. The search for him was stopped by rough weather this morning, and Sea Lord says it will not be resumed unless new information comes to hand. The company says the estimated survival time in such waters without a life jacket has long passed. Rescuers are continuing to search for survivors in the rubble of ravaged beach communities in the US state of Florida. Hurricane Michael caused widespread destruction yesterday, as our US correspondent Rachel Silverman reports.
Florida's Panhandle is one huge disaster zone after being hit with catastrophic winds, heavy rain, and a 9-foot storm surge. Florida's governor has described the aftermath of Hurricane Michael as unimaginable destruction. At least 6 people are reported dead, and officials say that number is likely to rise. More than 1 million people in the southeastern part of the U.S. are without electricity. Flash flood and tornado warnings are in effect.
Rachel Silverman reporting. The author of a new book about climate change says the sea level is rising more than in the South Pacific than anywhere else in the world. Neville Peat, whose book The Invading Sea was launched yesterday, says the effects of global warming are compounded in the Pacific.
You get 2 things happening, more energy and more likelihood of cyclones developing, and then you get the cyclones are carrying this extra water vapour. Water vapour is itself a greenhouse gas, so you get that feedback. It's compounding on already a problem issue.
Neville Peat. Between 7 and 11 cyclones are forecast to hit the South Pacific this season, with 3 or 4 of them likely to be severe. Kanye West has lavished praise on Donald Trump in an expletive-filled monologue at the Oval Office. Wearing a Make America Great Again cap, the rapper banged his fist on the presidential desk. He'd been invited to the White House to discuss such matters as jobs and crime, but Superman and other things became the focus, leaving even Mr. Trump lost for words for once.
There was something about when I put this hat on, it made me feel like Superman. You made a Superman, that's my favorite superhero. And you made a Superman cape for me also as a guy that looks up to you, looks up to Ralph Lauren, looks up to American industry guys.
Kanye West at the White House earlier today. It's 6:05. To sport, and the outgoing New Zealand football president Derrick Shaw says he did not take lightly the decision to resign. An independent review of the organisation's culture and governance released last week was highly critical of Shaw's leadership and his handling of the former chief executive Andy Martin, who stepped down suddenly in June. While many in the football community thought Shaw should have resigned as soon as the review's findings were released, he felt it wasn't so clear-cut, as he wanted to be part of helping rebuild New Zealand football. However, he says he has now come to the conclusion it's better to step down. Meanwhile, the findings of an investigation into allegations of bullying, drinking and inappropriate relationships with an athlete by Cycling New Zealand's national sprint coach Anthony Peden will be released on Monday. The investigation by the former Solicitor General Michael Heron was to focus not only on cycling but also on High Performance Sport New Zealand and the part it played in enabling a toxic culture to fester in the organisation. The former Australia cricket international John Hastings admits his career is over unless he finds a way to curb a potentially fatal illness that's causing him to cough up blood when he bowls. The 32-year-old has represented Australia in all 3 formats of the game, but won't be able to keep playing while he continues to burst blood vessels in his lungs when he bowls. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Robin Green was the only woman on the masthead of Rolling Stone magazine in the early 70s. She remembers quite a lot of it. Maurice Shadbolt, the first New Zealand writer to make a living from it. Philip Temple's written a biography of a not always admirable man. And Professor Tim Flannery on the natural history of Europe. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, and a severe weather warnings and watches are in force for heavy snow and strong winds. For all of the North Island, rain or showers today with some heavy falls and snow lowering to 600 metres about the central high country tonight. Showers gradually clearing tomorrow and becoming fine. Southerly gales about Wellington and Taranaki easing early tomorrow. For Nelson Buller and Westland, scattered showers clearing this evening. Fine tomorrow with early frosts. Southeast gales in exposed places easing tonight. Marlborough and Canterbury, rain with snow to 300 metres easing this evening, then clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Showers returning to South Canterbury tomorrow night. Southerly gales about coastal areas easing tonight. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, showers falling as snow to 200 metres clearing tonight. Early frosts inland tomorrow, followed by further showers. And for the Chatham Islands, rain today, fine breaks tomorrow with the odd shower. It's coming up to 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you, Katrina. Yeah, we've just got a text in about that story of Derrick Shaw, the former chairman of New Zealand football.
Yes.
And they're saying you shouldn't call it football, it should be called soccer because football refers to rugby. And it's the same in Australia and other countries. I don't know. I think we're in a global world, and I think football is the world game, and it's won, hasn't it? I used to call it soccer, but I converted.
I think it should be called soccer football or football soccer.
Football soccer. It's a bit long.
Yeah. No, soccer football. I think you
Soccer
just
football.
could do that. But it's soccer in a lot of other countries. In America, it's soccer.
I think the term
because
came
you have
from
to
there.
be. Yeah, because it has to be. Football is their national game. Football over here refers to rugby or league. So I think it should be called soccer. But that's just me. I know you're supposed to call it football, but it does. It's confusing for us.
It's very confusing. We do have more sport coming up on the program before we go. 3 big rugby league games on the weekend, so stay tuned for a preview of that. But first, in the United States, the trail of death and destruction left by Hurricane Michael is emerging. The death toll stands at 6 and rescue and recovery efforts are continuing. The storm was one of the most powerful to ever make landfall in the US, with torrential rain and punishing winds of up to 250 kilometres an hour. On Florida's Mexico Beach, the destruction has been devastating for residents who say their previously picture-perfect beach city has been virtually wiped out. It's been described as ground zero, with homes and businesses flattened and damage as far as the eye can see. CNN's Brooke Baldwin took a helicopter flight to take it all in.
From the air, it's clear much of Mexico Beach is gone. From the ground, we see up close the devastation to the seaside city. Home after home on this stretch of beach destroyed. While most of the 1,200 residents evacuated, a small number stayed behind. We don't know yet how many survived the near direct hit from Hurricane Michael. Scott Botwell didn't make it out in time. The bridge is closed and he was stuck. How does it make you feel to look around at everything just leveled?
Well, the thing is, you know, this is a small little town, you know, this is our little town, and so every restaurant's gone, every store's gone, and then all my neighbors, everybody's home's gone. And so when you think about it, you know, all of these, their lives are gone here, you know, so what do you do? The water.
Scott says he lost most of his possessions, but he will stay and rebuild.
So the stuff that I thought I had, some of the stuff that I thought was of value is even gone here. Is you know, so anyway, it's hard to talk about this.
All over the area, we heard this constant high-pitched beeping. They are fire alarms buried in the rubble, warnings that perhaps came too late. Again and again, I heard from survivors here who told me they're simply grateful to be alive. These three friends were searching for one of their homes. It was hard for them to even recognize the street.
No.
There are no words.
No, there's not. There's so many memories here.
This woman named Sherry says she didn't have time to grab anything but some clothes and her jewelry box. And to see this,
yes,
feels like what?
I can't describe it. It's just terrible. I just can't describe the feeling, and I know I'm not the only one here that feels the same. They've lost everything.
Mexico Beach is virtually cut off from the rest of the state. Though emergency crews are working throughout the area, roads are still blocked, power is out, and cell service is non-existent.
Hallie, it's Mama. I'm okay. I'm okay. It was a lot rougher than we thought. How are you guys?
I got you. Our satellite phone was the only way for these women to contact their loved ones.
I love you too. Bye.
Oh, your daughter.
Okay, darling.
Brooke Baldwin reporting there from Florida. It's 12 and a half minutes past 6. Dame Jenny Shipley has described the perfect storm that led to the collapse of major construction firm Maine Zeal. Maine Zeal's liquidators are suing some of its former directors, including Dame Jenny, for $75 million, alleging they traded recklessly. The company went into liquidation back in 2013 and was one of the country's largest construction companies. Our reporter Tom Furley filed this report from the High Court in Auckland.
Dame Jenny continued giving evidence today and denied breaching her duties as a director amid allegations the board shouldn't have continued trading while Maine Zeal's coffers were empty. She spent all day in the witness box reading through an 82-page account of the board's decisions and experience. She said the board had been assured multiple times since 2004 that despite Maine Zeal's poor profits, including a $20 million hit from its Vector Arena project, that they could rely on their parent group, Regina Pacific Limited or RPL, for support. She said that support formed part of what she saw as positive prospects for the company.
For those reasons, I did not at all accept the liquidators' assertion that Maine Zeal was insolvent at the end of 2008.
She strongly rejected claims by the liquidators that the company should have stopped trading in July 2011 due to mounting challenges including leaky building claims.
I do not agree with that assertion. The plaintiffs' focus on Maine Zeal's own balance sheet in isolation misses the point entirely. The directors of Maine Zeal, consistent with the Charter and our experience over several years, did not consider that Maine Zeal's solvency depended entirely on its own balance sheet. It was part of an investment group, as it always had been. It received support from that group. That group had substantial assets.
In January 2013, the board of a newly restructured Maine Zeal group met, and Dame Jenny said while they agreed cash flow was very tight, they had a plan underway to sell assets. They also had the support of their bank, BNZ, and cash injections from RPL.
A properly recapitalised Maine Zeal would have the opportunity to shake free of the legacy leaky building issues and focus on growth.
However, just over a week after the board meeting and confirmation from RPL CEO Richard Yan that they still had their support, things seemed to change.
Unexpectedly, on the morning of the 29th of January, I received a formal letter of advice from Richard that, having asked directors of CHC whether they could continue to guarantee parent support to Maine Zeal in the form of prepaid materials, they in fact declined to do so. Richard asked for a board meeting to consider asking the bank to appoint receivers.
Dame Jenny said this was a huge disappointment, and the RPL board told her they hadn't met or come to that conclusion. She said Maine Zeal had a series of tense board meetings and sought explanations from Richard Yan, who said RPL would continue to support Maine Zeal by other means.
Despite our ongoing best efforts to find a solution, we were not able to satisfy BNZ sufficiently to ensure its ongoing support. Richard's letter had totally undermined our credibility, and we did put a number of commercial solutions to BNZ. However, Maine Zeal directors could not give the undertakings BNZ was seeking. Only RPL directors could do so.
She said she recorded a personal memorandum about what she called the perfect storm Maine Zeal had been exposed to. Soon after, Dame Jenny, alongside 3 other directors, resigned as they could not reassure the bank, leaving it in the hands of Richard Yan and RPL.
We hoped that they would find ways to save the company, the 450 loyal employees and the many subcontractors, creditors and customers. To my great regret, that did not occur, and Maine Zeal was put into receivership on the evening of the 5th of February.
The hearing before Justice Cook continues next week, when Dame Jenny will be cross-examined. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
16 minutes past 6. The leading shareholder of New Zealand's biggest electricity distributor is calling on the Commerce Commission to investigate 4 major power suppliers over what it calls corporate welfare. Entrust says Meridian, Genesis Energy, Mercury, as well as Contact Energy may have colluded and engaged in anti-competitive behaviour over the provision of cheap electricity to Southland's Tiwai aluminium smelter. Now, it says the deal for the 100% foreign-owned smelter came at the expense of consumers because it paid $9 million less than Contact would have received from selling that electricity on the open market. Now, Contact Energy denies any claims of collusion, and when we finally tracked down Entrust Chairman William Cairns today, he actually couldn't provide any evidence for what he called his hunches.
A deal, obviously, with with the Tiwai smelter. My view is that as a result of this, consumers may be paying more for electricity across New Zealand.
Okay, and you say may be paying more, so how likely is it that, as I say, that I suppose that the favourable conditions for Tiwai are directly affecting the consumers? Can you stand that up?
I don't have the figures right in front of me, so that's why I'm using the word maybe. We know that Tiwai uses about 14% of all the electricity generated in New Zealand. So what we've done is asked the Commerce Commission to investigate whether what I'm implying is correct or not. Now, the Commerce Commission mightn't take it any further, or they might take it further, or they might say there is something in this. But the second thing about being Entrust is a consumer trust, and part of the role of Entrust is to advocate for the consumers. So what we do is, if I think we can get the consumers a better deal or a more favourable price for electricity, I want to pursue that.
Okay, we had this retail pricing report come out, what was it, a couple of months ago perhaps, and I think one of the big things that came out of that is just that consumers need to be more savvy in playing the market, because it's a competitive market, there's plenty of providers there. Is that really what needs to happen, or are you saying that we've got to possibly put at risk smelter that Southland really needs in terms of jobs?
Look, all we've done is asked the Commerce Commission to have a look at this. Really, it's up to them to come back. They might come back and say, look, you know, there's nothing there and we're happy with everything, or they might say consumers would get better prices. I don't know. We've just asked them. They are the regulator. They are the body. We've just asked them to follow this up.
OK, but you've got to give us at least one reason why you've put this press release out and why you're concerned. I mean, you obviously have a pretty big hunch there's a link. So what's one reason?
I do have a hunch there's a link, but it's just constantly people ask me, why is electricity so expensive in New Zealand for the average person? Part of my consumer role is to listen to these issues, and that's why I've approached the Commerce Commission. OK, you're singling out particular providers here. You've mentioned Contact and Meridian, and you're saying that they need to clear up whether there has been collusion or rather anti-competitive behaviour. So are you accusing them of collusion? No, I'm not. All I've done is approach the Commerce Commission to investigate this and to have a look at this. Well, they'll need a better reason than that, won't they? Oh, the Commerce Commission is the regulator out there. We're a large consumer trust, and if we think this has been happening, or we believe it's been happening, that's the body to talk to. Our reporters have spoken to a fair few interested parties here, and some of them are rather cynical, William. They say this is just a publicity stunt for your leadership. What do you have to say about that? No, look, there's an electricity price review going on at the moment. It's underway, so this is an opportune time to raise this issue. So, yeah, so that's no. OK, and what exactly are you calling on the Commission to look at? Just to look at whether or not consumers, if there was a lesser electricity deal generated there, would the consumers be better off? So it's a broad brush, big picture thing. What we're wanting to do is to ascertain, would our consumers, or would the consumers throughout New Zealand have a better deal? Sure. But, I mean, do you think overall, at the moment, we're paying too much? Because what the figure came out a few months ago, that we're paying 80% more for power than we were back in 1990. Are you concerned about that we're currently paying too much for electricity? I want the consumer, you know, the man and the woman in the suburbs, the families, all those sort of people, to get the best deal possible. You know, I'm not advocating we subsidise electricity or anything. I just want the average person, our consumers, to get the best deal possible. And why do you think that consumers at the moment are not getting the best deal? Oh, look, it's just feedback I get from talking to various people. It's just feedback. So, you know, I thought, yeah, we'd take this to the next step. William Cairns. And in a statement, Contact Energy's Chief Executive Dennis Barnes says his company had conducted business with Meridian in accordance with good business practice and consistent with the law. He says, and I quote, "We strongly refute the allegations that we were or are involved in any collusion or restrictive trade practices. We are proud of our reputation as a company that operates in an ethical manner and well within the laws of the country." It's 6:23. To sport now, Kiwis winger Jordan Rapana is facing a conflict of interest with his younger sister during this weekend's historic Trans-Tasman League triple header. He's playing for New Zealand. She's turning out for the Australian Jillaroos. Jordan and sister Tasman Grey are part of a weekend of league when the Kiwis, the Kiwi Ferns, as well as the juniors take on their respective Australian opponents at Mount Smart Stadium. Sports reporter Ravinda Hunia with this report.
It's not uncommon for siblings to grow up playing the same professional sport. But what if your sister told you she's been selected to play for your biggest international rival?
I called her a bit of a dog, but she was born there. Out of the 10 siblings that we have in our family, she was the one that was born in Aussie, and I think she was torn. Yeah, she was a little bit torn of who to play for. She called me and asked me, and I said, not a question, mate. Play for the Kiwi fans. I think she sat down with her husband and their family and had a good hard think about it.
The youngest of the family, Tasman grew up playing through the Women's New South Wales Rugby League system, qualifying her for the green and gold. And while she acknowledges her heritage and her brother's decision to play for New Zealand, for her, Australia is home.
I'm proud of him for the decision that he's made to be able to play for the Kiwis and do his role there. As for myself, I know that he's proud of me, and that's a massive part of playing rugby league in our family. It's a culture in our family, and we love the game. So to be able to play for me, be able to play for Australia, and him to be able to play for New Zealand it's pretty cool.
Born in Wellington, Jordan has played for the Cook Islands and New Zealand Māori, but after debuting for the Kiwis in 2016, admits he would have preferred his sister to follow suit. But he doesn't expect her to take his advice anytime soon.
She just tells me to shut up. I always try to tell her, you need to work on this, you need to do this. And she's just going, shut up, you're on the wing, you don't know anything. Because she's obviously a back rower, but she puts me in my place.
The sibling rivalry banter stops there though. Jordan has respect for his sister's hard work. Only 7 months after giving birth, Tasman's performances as a back rower for the women's Queensland side and the Sydney Roosters this year earned her a Jillaroo spot, becoming one of 6 players to debut.
For me, it was like a dream come true. Obviously, just coming back from having a baby so soon, I didn't expect to be able to reach these goals so soon. So for me, it was exciting, and I feel honoured to be able to represent Australia.
It's a feat she credits to her upbringing. Tasman remembers growing up alongside her 6 brothers who all taught her the craft of rugby league, and admits it's moulded her play.
I grew up on the back end of them, so no other choice but to be rough and to be able to hold the ball, unless, or if I didn't, I was going to get steamrolled. We don't really talk too much footy, but when we do, I know that I'm just grateful for what he has to say and being able to support me in what I do.
And while it will make for interesting conversations at the Rapana household these holidays, Jordan couldn't be more proud of his sister's efforts.
So yeah, everyone says she's the best in the family, so I just have to take it. But, I'm proud of her and happy as for her that she chose the Aussies, and wish her all the best.
The World Cup champion Jillaroos will face the Kiwi Ferns in the first and only battle between them this year on Saturday. Then the Kiwis will face a new-look Kangaroo side. Mo te hōtaka o te pō nei, ko Ravinda Hunia aho.
Kia ora, Ravinda. Let's stay with sport now. Our sports reporter Clay Wilson joins me in the studio to preview a few things coming up. Just quickly, Clay, Derrick Shaw's resignation. Anything to add on that?
Well, it's not really a huge shock. I know he said last week, even on the show, that he wasn't intending on standing down, but the pressure was always mounting on Derrick Shaw. So I think it was inevitable that he was going to have to stand down, and I guess it's the right move. It really was the only way to move forward. We obviously had Andy Martin, the head of New Zealand football, stand down. Yes. Andreas Haraf, the coach of the football Ferns, stand down. Derrick Shaw really was last man standing in terms of the key figures that were, I guess, implicit in a lot of the findings of the review, and which were pretty damning. So he really had to step aside. I guess the question now is the remaining committee members.
Who stays, who goes?
Who stays, who goes? Because I guess Shaw wasn't on this, didn't oversee this on his own. A lot of these committee members have been around to see a lot of this stuff happen. So you would think trying to move forward and make change while some of the people that oversaw those issues are still around. At least perhaps maybe some members might call for a re-election of the executive committee or an extraordinary Congress or something of that nature. So we wouldn't rule that out, definitely.
Okay, speaking of reviews, there's one coming up on cycling, right?
Yeah, one of the first reviews actually to come out amongst the number of sporting reviews we've seen this year, and almost the last to be revealed, which obviously suggests there's a fair bit of detail in this one. Obviously, Cycling New Zealand this was centred around the national sprint coach Anthony Peden allegations, similar allegations to the football which we just spoke about, intimidation, bullying. But this one also was alleged to involve an inappropriate relationship with an athlete. So, definitely interesting, and I think a number of people are going to be keeping their eyes on that to see what comes of it.
Mm-hmm. And then the Silver Ferns, gosh, not as good as what we thought they'd do, or maybe what we hoped. And there's one more game in that Trans-Tasman series.
So two left, a four-game series.
Sorry.
First two in Australia and the second two now in New Zealand. And I guess the results haven't been great for the Silver Ferns in these first two tests. They've lost both tests. But if you look a bit deeper, I think the performances do show some signs of improvement under Nolene Taurua. Even in that second test on Wednesday, a very bad start, but they actually got within one goal sort of midway through the fourth quarter and then just couldn't quite finish it off. So perhaps signs that they are starting to make some improvements, and I guess coming back to New Zealand always boosts your chances on home soil. They probably won't win both of these games, but I don't think people would be really surprised if they snuck a win in one of these games, and that would be incredibly heartening for this team given everything they've gone through over the last 12 to 24 months.
Quickly before we go, Clayton, soccer or football?
Oh, football, definitely.
Football, there you go. Yeah, someone suggested, Gabrielle's got in touch and she says footsock because it's about as interesting as one. You're welcome, Gabrielle. Thanks very much, Gabrielle. Get out to the football or the rugby league, whatever it is this weekend. Have a good one. All the best. Ka kite anō.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The police have praised the quick-thinking father of two children who escaped uninjured when a bus veered onto a pedestrian crossing in Auckland today. A New Zealander ordered by an Israeli court to pay damages for encouraging Lorde to cancel her concerts last year says the ruling shows Israel is far from a democracy. The Auckland Secondary Principals Association says including teaching on the government's essential skill shortage lists would be fantastic. And a crew member missing from a fishing boat off southern Wairarapa since yesterday has been named as 25-year-old Patahi Rewi Hawaikirangi Kawana from Hawke's Bay. Our next news and weather is at 7.
RNZ National, with a fresh take on the day's news at 10 every weeknight with Karen Hay.
Seeing him in court was kind of the icing on the cake because I saw him as pathetic.
Including the latest